We'll start the meeting of May 6th, 2014. Would you please join me for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Francisco.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Hotchkiss.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
White.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Murillo.
Here. Thank you.
And Mayor Schneider.
And we're starting with a ceremonial item. Is that right? Would you read that for us, please?
Item 1, Employee Recognition Service Award Pins.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. As you know, every month we present service award pins to employees who are celebrating important anniversaries with the city. And this month we're presenting several in their departments. There's no one here to receive their pin personally, but I still would like to read their names into the record.
Very good.
So first, with 5 years, Rebecca Claridge, who's a public safety dispatcher in the police department. With 10 years, Doug Smith, senior accountant in finance. And Jose Torres, water distribution equipment operator 1 in Public Works. With 15 years, Deirdre Randolph, community development program supervisor in community development. Dean Carr, water treatment plant operator 2 in Public Works. Perry Kabugos, who's a senior water treatment plant technician in Public Works. And Polo Icepero, who's a ground maintenance worker 2 in Parks and Rec. And with 30 years, Caroline Ortega, who's a buyer in the finance department.
We are grateful for their service and congratulate them on these milestones.
Okay.
Thank you. Did I forget to ask you if there's changes to the agenda? And there's none.
No changes.
Okay. So the next thing is our presentation to Girls, Inc. Okay.
Item 2, Proclamation declaring May 5th through 9th, 2014 as Girls Incorporated Week.
Honoring Girls Incorporated Week. Whereas Girls Inc. is a research, education, and advocacy organization whose mission is to inspire all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. And whereas for more than 150 years nationally and more than 50 years locally, Girls Inc. has provided vital educational programs to help confront societal messages about their value and potential and prepares them to take risks, master physical, intellectual, and emotional challenges, and to lead successful, independent, fulfilling lives. And whereas Girls Inc. asserts girls have the right to be themselves and resist gender stereotypes, express themselves with originality and enthusiasm, take risks, to strive freely, and to take pride in success. And whereas Girls Inc. professionally trained staff and volunteers encourage girls to build skills and self-confidence through hands-on activities and programs that let girls discover their strengths in areas such as math, science, technology, sports, adventure, leadership, career planning, and life skills. On behalf of Mayor Helene Schneider, we declare this May 5th through May 9th Girls Incorporated Week in honor of your commitment to nurturing girls' dreams and supporting girls' rights. So here you go, and you're welcome to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you very, very much. I'm Monica Spear, and I'm honored to serve as the Executive Director for Girls Incorporated of Greater Santa Barbara. And here with me today is Shane Meserve. She is our Santa Barbara Center Director. And it's our great privilege and honor to accept this proclamation on behalf of our organization, especially on behalf of our girls, who this means so much for in terms of your support and our community's support in declaring this Girls Inc. Week. The lasting difference that Girls Inc. makes for and with girls sets us apart. There is no other organization that does what we do for girls with the same level of intensity, consistency, and accountability. Our mission is to inspire all girls to be strong, smart, and bold. We believe deeply in the fundamental rights and abilities of girls and enact these values in our direct service work and public policy efforts. I'd like you, especially on a day when we're working to bring back our girls and when our worldly messages are still telling girls that they aren't of the same value that we would like, to imagine a world in which that's different. To imagine a world in which many more girls grow up strong, smart, and bold. With your support, Girls Inc. can and will increase the number of girls who have the opportunities they need and deserve to develop their special strengths, break through barriers, achieve their full potential, and prepare for productive, independent, and fulfilling futures. So again, on behalf of our entire organization, thank you very much for this special proclamation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll go to public comment now. And our first speaker is Eva Figueroa. She'll be followed by Clint Orr and Audrey Addison Williams. And you have 2 minutes to speak. Ms. Figueroa, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members, participants, and viewers. My name is Eva Figueroa, and today I am here in support of the Santa Barbara community. Soon we will be affected by a California Public Utility Commission, CPUC, decision. The Southern California Gas Company has proposed a plan to the CPUC to close Santa Barbara's gas company branch office. The Southern California Gas Company should continue to maintain their highest level of customer service in Santa Barbara as it does in other communities. We currently have in-person bilingual assistance, a way to report gas leaks, to schedule service, to get financial assistance, to provide identity validation when establishing service. We are customers. We have accessibility to in-person assistance. The CPUC has agreed to public participation, a hearing scheduled coming Wednesday, May 14th at 6 p.m. in the Santa Cruz Room at the Bess Parker Doubletree Hilton, located at 633 East Cabrillo Boulevard in Santa Barbara. I ask that you take this opportunity to speak to the CPUC and speak out against the Santa Barbara's gas company branch closure. Here is an opportunity for you as a member of the Santa Barbara community to speak in support of a senior or disabled neighbor or for yourself, to continue to have a level of gas company service that has already been well established in your community. Again, May 14th at 6 p.m. at the Doubletree Hilton. If you need more information, I can be reached at 818-263-9792. Thank you.
Thank you. Clint Orr.
Mayor Pro Tem Murillo and council members, of course, I'm Clint Orr. Good afternoon. Of course, I'm looking to bring in a feasibility study about the airport honky-tonk at the Elephant Bar, which will be ready soon. I was at the last remaining dance hall in Santa Barbara County, Maverick, Saturday night, where the Rancheros Visitadores were congregating, and it was quite a time. It was fun. There's a lot of people there. The only problem is there was no couples dancing. Everybody, they played rock and roll until 11 o'clock, and they switched the DJ to hip-hop disco. I asked the owner, I said, so I guess you don't have any couples dance or anymore, and he just looked me in the eye and said, couples dancing doesn't pay the bills. They make more money, get people drunker, jumping up and down, and that's not going to change. It's been that way for 20 years now. And it's not going to change. Well, it's going to change if I have any say and if I can raise the funds to change. The California Country Dance Foundation is here to provide free habitat to all ages where they can learn couples dance, again, the two-step cowboy cha-cha, West Coast swing, East Coast swing, and waltz. Just the 5 most popular dances in the United States of America. That's all I ask. I'm not concerned about the stuff that from Europe in the 1800s. I'm not concerned about Latin so much. I mean, if they want to learn that, they can do that wherever they want to. But I think that as an American, you should learn America's dances. It's just a fundamental that I feel very strongly about. This morning, I spoke with a gal at Starbucks. I heard that she was a dancing cowgirl, and I asked her if she knew any boys that could lead, and she goes, "Well, yeah, his name's Andrew." And that's a true
Mr.
story.
Orr, you've been talking for 2 minutes, so wrap it up.
So anyway, she said all the girls know the leads, the boys don't. And I'll have the feasibility study for you in the next 10 days or so. So hang in there, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey Addison Williams, please.
Good afternoon to Kathy Maria, Pro Temp Mayor, City Council. I'm here bearing good news. You want to hear this and pay attention. I'm representing Professor Joe White, Chair of the Philosophy Department at Santa Barbara City College in a program called A Year Without War. I serve as Director of Faith Partners, and I'm here to announce a citywide initiative that is designed to create 300 paid internships, stipends, and allowances for city residents this summer, starting June through the end of the year. We're here to ask for your endorsement. On May 14th, Patty DiDominic in Montecito has agreed to host a Solana fundraiser. We're asking that the City Council be present at this event. That's May 14th from 5 to 7 at the home of Patty DiDominic, Montecito resident. On May 8th, this Thursday, Reverend Charles Reed will host a citywide event so that we can share with the city the program design, how nonprofits can be involved, and how the entire community can come together and have a chance to heal, economic empowerment, create jobs, and leadership training. Thank you so very much.
Ms. Williams, you can check with our secretary on your way out, and she'll tell you how to send us all emails and invite us to these events.
You should all have an email in your inbox,
Already?
and I'll follow it up to remind you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that closes public comment. And Madam Clerk, you have items to read from the consent calendar, please.
Item 4, Records Destruction for Administrative Services Department. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara relating to the destruction of records held by the Administrative Services Department in the City Clerk's Office and Human Resources Division. Item 5, Records Destruction for Community Development Department. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara relating to the destruction of records held by the Community Development Department in the Administration, Housing and Human Services, and Building and Safety Divisions. Item 9, set a date for public hearing regarding renewal of levy for fiscal year 2015 for the Wildland Fire Suppression Assessment. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara declaring its intention to continue the wildland fire suppression assessment within the foothill and extreme foothill zones, declaring the work to be of more than general or ordinary benefit, and describing the district to be assessed to pay the costs and expenses thereof. Preliminarily approving the updated engineer's report, stating intention to continue assessments for fiscal year 2015, and establishing a time of 2 p.m. on Tuesday, May 20th, 2014, in the City Council chambers for a public hearing on the wildland fire suppression assessment.
Thank you. The wildland fire suppression assessment is an issue that 2 council members need to make a statement about, and also a staff member, our city attorney. Go ahead, Councilmember Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I'm sorry, I had a hard time getting that out. Yes, I live within the area affected by item 9, and so must, I think, just abstain on this item.
Right.
And I too, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
And you don't have to leave the room, though, right? That's what, okay. And Mr. Attorney?
Yeah, I own a home within the assessment area, so I need to recuse myself.
Okay. So we do have a speaker for item 10. should we do that, and then we'll vote on all the stuff sort of separately? So Trevor Martinson, you'd like to talk about item number 10. I'm sorry, would you read number 10, please?
Item 10, set a date for public hearing regarding appeal of Architectural Board of Review approval for 510 North South Sepuetas Street.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem and members of the council. I'm going to quickly read the letter that was delivered to you all yesterday, and it's regarding item 10 on the consent calendar, and the appellant's request that you do not set the hearing date on the 20th of May, 2014. As you know, I represent the appellants, and on the day of my filing this appeal, I specifically told the city clerk that my clients and I could not schedule the hearing on the date of 20 May 2014. A week ago, I spoke to you about the scheduling of this appeal. I believe planning staff and the city clerk may have exceeded and abused their authority, as noted in Chapter 1.30.050B, by establishing an immediate and without my consent date for this appeal when I filed the required written notice of appeal to the city clerk. We are especially concerned about how appellants are being treated here because the city routinely extends to developers the courtesy which is being denied to citizens who appeal. Developers are routinely consulted on acceptable dates for the appeal hearing. We, on the other hand, are being handed a hearing date, take it or leave it. This could be construed by a court as a violation of the equal protection guarantees of both the U.S. and California constitutions. And cases Village of Willowbrook v. Olick, and that's the U.S., and Genesis Environmental Services versus the San Joaquin Valley Unified Air Pollution Control District, and that is in the 113 Cal Appeal District in 2003. Therefore, we ask that you do not approve item 10 so that it can be brought back on next week's calendar for us to set a mutually acceptable date. Thanking you in advance for respecting the principles of civility and fairness in setting the hearing date on this matter. And if I have another couple of seconds, Madam Pro Tem, the previous meeting which we discussed, Planning Commission, you do have an option here. Rather than setting appeal date, you can turn this over to the Planning Commission for review, and we might be able to review and hopefully solve these problems before the appeal has to go through and lawsuits are filed. I would rather not go there, and I think that the Planning Commission could really do a good justice to this.
Thank you, Mr. Martinson. Mr. Francisco, you have a comment?
A question for Mr. Martinson.
A question, sir?
Sorry.
So you're unavailable on the 20th?
That's correct.
Would you be available the following week?
No, but we would be available in June. And, you know, to me, it
So
seemed reasonable.
you and the appellant are out of town for May?
Yes, and there are some family issues for him as well, as he may be in Minnesota. And I have consultants that also have dates that they have to comply with, so that's why we're requesting I think I mentioned the 10th and the 17th and the 24th of June. Any of those would work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's vote on item 9 first. Do I have a motion for the wildland fire suppression assessment?
So moved. Second.
Okay. We have and some people are abstaining, so we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain.
I was going to ask for abstain. Okay, so 2 abstain. Okay, good. So you're good with that, Madam Clerk? Okay. Do I have a motion for the remainder of the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded?
Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry?
To the motion.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I am understood, and perhaps we could get a comment on the timing of the appeal hearing. I'm understanding that there are issues with regards to some funding or some such like. So perhaps we could get a comment from staff on that.
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Murillo and Councilmember White. As you know, this item was previously appealed and was scheduled for an appeal on April the 29th, and Mr. Martinson withdrew that appeal and then submitted a new appeal based on an additional ABR hearing. And we are aware that the developer is under some financial constraints to get in their applications for tax credit and some other things, and we felt that the request to then delay this all the way until the earliest date he said they were available was June 10th wasn't fair to the developer because this project's already been delayed. And so after consultation with the city attorney's office, the decision was made to schedule for the 20th. And we view this very much as a court does. You know, we schedule these things, and sometimes folks have to rearrange their schedule. And we didn't feel it was fair to the developer to hold up his project even further.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll take a vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes,
I'm sorry,
sir.
I was trying to get your attention. If I might, for the record, I think it's important for the council and the minutes to reflect that last week Mr. Martinson didn't say anything about unavailability. He said he wouldn't have time in the 21 days he had at that point to prepare, and that's very different from now stating today for the first time that he would be unavailable.
Thank you for pointing that out. And if we could have the minutes reflect that. Thank you, sir. We're moving on in the calendar to a report from the Finance Committee, please. Mr. Francisco.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Finance Committee met today. We heard a report on planned changes in the next fiscal year to fees from various general fund departments. We also heard a discussion and made a recommendation to Council, which Council has approved, for a loan adjustment on affordable housing.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Rouse, you're the chair of the Ordinance Committee. Do you have a report, sir?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. The Ordinance Committee met today to discuss the average unit density ordinance and potential triggers for a referral to the Planning Commission, and we will be referring staff recommendations to the full council.
Very good. We're moving on to item 12. Madam Clerk?
Item 12, contract for preliminary design services for recommissioning the Charles E. Meyer desalination facility.
Very good. We have some public speakers on that. And Mr. Hagmark and Ms. Bjork, whenever you all are ready.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, council members, my name is Joshua Hagmark. I'm the acting water resources manager, and I'm here today to walk you through the recommendation before you for preliminary design services for the reactivation of the Charles E. Meyer desalination facility. In my discussion today, I will be reviewing the city's water supplies, discussing the desalination facility's history in brief, talk about the consultant selection process we went through, discussing what the scope, schedule, and costs look like, also getting into some project uncertainties as we move forward, and ultimately the recommendation. So this is, for those who've been watching the monthly drought updates, this is a familiar graph showing our current supply strategy. And there are 3 points that I'd like to make with this graph. One is to show kind of our approach to drought planning and how we're trying to leverage the surface water supplies that we currently have and stretch them as far as we can. And that through conservation measures, through a diverse water supply portfolio. We certainly don't have all our eggs in one basket. We're trying to diversify as much as we can so no one supply leads to our demise. We have several supplies to back it up. The desalination facility, as you can see, comes into plan right now in year 6. So it's pretty much part of our response if everything else doesn't come through. And we have this assumption here assumes no reservoir inflows and no state water, which is pretty conservative. And I think I'd like to point out, too, getting here, in the 1980s, this community used over 16,000 acre-feet of water, and over the last 20 years plus, we have had a very aggressive conservation program that has reduced our water usage on average by about 20%, despite adding about 5% to our community and having over 5 million visitors every year to Santa Barbara. So I think this community has done a lot to address its water usage and continues to do so. So water shortage contingency plan. Within the city's long-term water supply plan, we recognize we have a water shortage contingency plan. And with that plan, we are kind of moving through it now. And one of them is supplemental water purchases. As you know, I've been keeping you guys updated on that. We have several options for purchasing water, but with any of those options, none of them is sufficient enough to solve all of our water problems should we get to year 6. We cannot convey enough water if the water were even available. Additionally, we're moving forward with extraordinary conservation measures as we move towards a proposal to go to a stage 2 declaration. With that becomes regulations to help encourage folks to take that next step on reducing their water usage, and also rates to help people get there and to keep our revenues neutral, so we keep the water fund afloat. And then finally, desalination is part of our water shortage supply plan. Now, the history of the facility, it was constructed and completed in 1992. In 1994, it was placed in long-term standby mode. It was a business decision based on the cost of producing desalinated water. Staff moved forward to permanently permit the facility, and that was completed in 1996. And that's when we received our coastal development permit for permanent installation. Has been part of our long-term water supply plan since 1994, and that long-term water supply plan was recently updated and adopted by Council in 2011. So our consultant selection, we put together a very detailed request for proposals. It went out to 11 firms. We got 3 very qualified firms to respond. We were pleased with that response. Some great teams. We put together a diverse panel of some staff internally from various parts of the city, along with we had a neighboring water agency participate as well. Ultimately, it was unanimous. They all believed that Carollo Engineers was the preferred consultant to move forward with, and their diverse background and both local California projects in desal and their international experience were some of the selling points. As part of the scope of services, there are 3 main phases. The phase 1 is basically the study phase. What we're going to be doing is looking at the capacity of the facility. In our long-term water supply plan, we recognize a capacity of 3,100 acre-feet a year. But due to the unprecedented nature of this drought, we're going to have the consultant take a look at that and work with our internal water supply analyst to see if that's still an appropriate capacity. Another thing we're going to take a look at is what technology is out there so that we can minimize, reduce environmental impacts and our energy usage as well, since desal has notoriously been a large energy user. And then as part of it, we're going to have the consultant team also help us out with evaluating our existing permits and help us to lay out a path for renewal or confirm validity. Help us out with funding, financial alternatives, which currently there are grants, which we are actively looking for with their assistance. We also have a state revolving fund loan, which we did submit a statement of intent to them, letting them know we're very interested, and hopefully that would come through. That's probably our cheapest form of funding through a loan. But we're also making preparations if we need to go to bonds or COPs. That's also another alternative that we'll be exploring. So phase 2 is basically the performance specification. This would be the document that we would be able to select the design, build, operator. This is kind of a unique terminology for the city. We don't do this very often, and I'll explain why. But the design, build, operate, you're basically one entity, one firm will have both the engineering design aspects, it will have the construction team, and it will have the ability to operate the facility. This is how the original plant was constructed and operated, and was talking to those who were around. That was a very successful relationship having it that way. Now, the benefits of DBO are it allows both design and construction to move in parallel to each other, a slight stagger, but in parallel, which allows us to shave off at least a year, if not more. And then there's the reduced risk. In this sense, we're able to transfer the responsibility of delivering that water to one entity who controls both all the design, the construction, and the operations. And so with that, we don't have a whole bunch of separate entities like we normally would see in our low bid contract approach. And then the final phase is the design, build, operate proposal evaluation, where Corolla would be on board to help us out with that evaluation process. Because typically with these DBOs, there are several variations that you'll put together, like maybe different design schemes. And so it may not be the cheapest solution, but the approach, there's an aspect of the approach that you may be more desirable to the city. And so that'll be part of that selection process that we would go through. So I do have a graphic after this, but just to quickly go through the schedule, here we are May 6th. Should council choose to award the contract, we would move forward with preliminary design and permitting services. In September, the goal is to come back to council in September and present the summary of the findings, basically the costs that we anticipate to see from restarting the project, an updated schedule, a clear path for what we need to do to accomplish and obtain the permits necessary, and a recommendation or approval from council to move forward with releasing the request for proposals to actually do the design, build, operate contract. So that would be released in November. Those would come back in February of 2015. There'd be a time to evaluate those proposals, and with the idea that after next year's winter, we'll have a very good understanding of whether we need to move forward quickly with this or whether we may get adequate rains next year that allows us to push this decision off for a year or more. But that we'd be looking to make some type of decision in April of 2015, and that would probably coincide with going to a stage 3 if we are in that particular situation where we saw another rainy year like this year. If we did move forward in 2015, the facility would be in operation by the summer of 2016. So how does that, I kind of put this graphic together to kind of show where we are. So if you look at year 3 right here, begin pre-design is where we are right now. And we are moving towards considering award of the design build contract next April in what we call year 4 of the drought. That would bring the facility on sometime in the summer of 2016. And currently our recognized critical need would be in year 6. So the contracts before you today, the preliminary design and permitting services contracts totaled $935,000. And I know I've talked about this before, but the reactivation of the facility at this point, the latest information we have is from a 2009 study that was done looking at the capacity of 3,100 acre feet a year. And they estimated to be about $20 million. Taking into consideration that estimate's about 5 years old, and looking at inflation, in current dollars, that'd be about $23 million. And then a contingency, which I would anticipate with a project with this many unknowns, which I'll be getting into, or variables, possible contingency of 25% gets us up to about $28 million to reactivate the facility. And then from that 2009 study, they estimated to be about $5 million a year to operate at that capacity. Funding, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to pursue grants, but the challenge with this, the uncertainties are just what the costs would be. Obviously, if we get grants, that's probably the best scenario. The state revolving fund loan, it has a lower interest, but the cost impacts of that, and then the bonds and COPs, that's based on the market for that. So there's a cost uncertainty there. And then as far as the permits go, there are 2 main permits that we are going to be actively looking at over the next couple months, and that's our coastal development permit and our NPDES. And to just kind of summarize, the coastal development permit looks at the intake is primarily the concern of that permit, the intake into the facility, and the NPDES, or National Pollution Discharge Elimination, looks at the effluent or the outfall for this, which is actually tied into our wastewater treatment plant outfall. Now, some of the terminology that I think is important in this, going forward, just for the sake of the discussion, is impingement and entrainment. That's one of the big issues that the coastal development permit has. It's basically the entrapment of marine life against the screen or marine life that has been brought into the pumps. And so that is one of the impacts that we'll be looking at as we move forward with our discussions with the Coastal Commission. There have been, talking with our consultant, doing some of these marine life studies could easily top $750,000. We're just looking at what some of those studies look like. There's a plant down in San Diego area called the Carlsbad. They've been doing extensive studies on the impingement and entrainment issues, and so along with Huntington Beach, there's several throughout the state who have done some studies on this, but this is approximately what the cost of that kind of study, and that may be something we come back to you in the next few months and need additional authorization if we have to go that direction.
We have a question from Dale Francisco.
Mr. Hagmark, are you saying that Carollo Engineers is involved in these studies with Carlsbad and Huntington Beach?
They're part of their team, yes. Part of it hasn't been, yeah. Their Dudek and Associates was involved in the Carlsbad project.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So our coastal.
Let me interrupt you then. So there's another way to intake water, right, for our desal plant, and that would be a subsurface intake. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, subsurface was looked at. I mean, I should back up a little bit. Before the city jumped into desalination in the 90s, there was actually a lot of studies done on this, and because we wanted to make sure. I mean, they looked at what if we emptied the silt out of Gibraltar. They looked at all these different variables to try and come up with an answer to the city's water shortage issues that could come up. And they ultimately landed on desal. And then when they landed on it, they looked at all the different challenges with that. And one of the things they looked into extensively was subsurface intakes, because there is a perception that there'd be a lot less environmental impacts if you go that route. Well, the study that was done by CH2M Hill at the time showed that there'd be several hundred wells needed on the beach or just offshore to adequately meet the capacity of our plant. Just because of the nature of the geology, there wasn't the ability to move a sufficient amount of water or to meet the demands of the facility, which isn't that big of a facility in the big picture. But so that was dismissed as an environmentally superior option, and what was landed on was going with the city's existing sewer, old abandoned sewer outfall. And what we did is we went in and we lined that old sewer outfall because it had the least impact to the environment over any other alternative. So it was extensively looked at the time.
But that study was done 24 years ago, correct?
It has, and technology has changed, and that's certainly one of the things that we're going to have Carollo looking at, but the geology hasn't changed. The amount of water that can move through that soil hasn't changed, but technology has, so maybe there's alternatives there. So the coastal development permit, the temporary permit was issued in 91 prior to our start, and it was a 5-year permit. And we, as soon as the facility was turned off in 92, the staff got on the task of permanently permitting it because we wanted to make it part of our long-term water supply plan. There were 4 operating scenarios that were identified in that permit, and one that's most applicable to today's discussion is scenario 1, intermittent operation to meet drought needs of the city. That was a pretty clear explanation of how this facility could be operated, and that's how it was approved. In March of 2014, the city sent a letter to the California Coastal Commission informing them of our intentions to reactivate the facility, and we did hear back from them in April. And they shared concerns about our restarting and felt that we may need a new permit. But the door, I think, was left open for a discussion about what that is, because I think there was a lot of misinformation, and we're just getting started. So what we've set up on May 21st is an interagency meeting in Sacramento. So we're going to be going up there to meet with the California Coastal Commission, the California Water Resources Control Board, the California Ocean Protection Council, and the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. So quite a group of players. We're really pleased that all these players wanted to get together at the same time because I think it could save a lot of energy. They all have a little different perspective on it. but we're going to be presenting there all of the history, basically, of our facility and what we've done to maintain the facility, the amount of money we've spent on permitting, what we've done to kind of keep some of the infrastructure in working condition. And then we're also following up on May 22nd with a meeting just with the California Coastal Commission in San Francisco to meet with their staff. Mainly at that point, we want to kind of get feedback on what their thoughts are so that our team can take that back and come up with some ideas that we think might be feasible. So, in conclusion, my recommendations today are to authorize a contract with Corolla Engineers for preliminary design services in the amount not to exceed $820,628. Authorize a contract with McCabe and Company in an amount not to exceed $90,000 for lobbying and support services. And authorize a contract with Hanson Bridget in an amount not to exceed $25,000 for legal support services. And I should back up, the Hanson and Bridget contract is specifically related to the design, build, operate. I don't know if I mentioned that, but their experiences, there's design, build, operate contracts are unique. And Hanson Bridget brings that legal experience on how to approach those contracts to make sure that the city is in a good position and we have maximum flexibility to what option is best for our community. So that's their role. So that concludes my discussion, if there's any questions.
May I start off by asking for you to describe what lobbying support services are?
Yes, McCabe and Company has experience working with the Coastal Commission on delicate issues like this. And so we've brought her on to help our team to know the best approach and how to work best with the Coastal Commission, because it seems to be a very charged issue about desal. And there are, to be honest with you, there's no guidelines for desalination facilities. And so it's a lot of us are moving around in the dark. And I know they are working on guidelines, but currently there are no guidelines for what is an acceptable intake or what is an acceptable desalination plant.
And we didn't go with an RFP for that contract because the amount is so low, or
it's kind of a
compared to the other one?
Right, it's a specialized service. I don't know that it's something you really can do a request for proposal on. I don't know if there's...
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Rouse.
Thank you. In terms of the chicken and egg part of this, from the May 21st meeting, is if we authorize Corolla, are they going to participate in that meeting, or is anybody from there going to participate?
Absolutely. Their team, along with their permitting team member, are going to be there. Yeah, they're a big part of that discussion.
And if there's some result where the permitting process is deemed so onerous that it's not even possible in our current concept, how far are we involved with this contract at that point in time?
It's a time and materials contract, so it'd be the time invested. I think there's a path through this. I think we will be working hard, hand in hand, to try to find the solution that meets everyone's needs.
I had one other question that maybe Mr. Colon, but in the CIR it talks about, it says city voters elected to make desal a permanent part of the city's water supply portfolio. So what does that mean in terms of our flexibility and whether to or to not start it? Is it sitting there in the dormant state considered still in keeping with the voters' decision to make it part of the portfolio? What's the structure of that? I don't really remember the vote and the language or any of that.
So from what I understand, and maybe Ms. Rebecca York can jump in here, but that vote was, it was a very contentious issue in the middle of a drought. What should we move forward with? And the voters actually voted to move forward with both state water project and desalination as sources of water for the city. And I
guess my question would be, though, if we decided, wow, we just don't want to do this, are we violating that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, I think the first question is, do we have the permits and the ability to do that? And I think the vote of the people expresses a desire. From the water supply management perspective, the issue would be, is our water supply plan and our urban water management plan up to date? If we decide that this is no longer an active water supply, and if it's not up to date, what other supplies do we need to develop to replace the supply that this represented?
Any other questions before we go to public comment? Mr. Hotchkiss.
Maybe I missed it, but is there no other alternative?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, is there no other alternative to desalination at this time? I think we have looked very hard at what our alternatives are, and we did evaluate in the 1980s raising Gibraltar and having additional storage at Gibraltar, and made a determination not to do so. So that alternative for the current water supply picture is off the table because we don't have any water in Gibraltar, and it's not going to come without rainfall. State water, as Mr. Hagmark indicated, should we be able to acquire all the state water that we could pump, that component will fall short of the shortage that we would anticipate under the dire planning consequence that we are looking at here. So really, the reason that we have kept desalination as a drought alternative is because it is the next available alternative that we can identify. And I think one of the things that's important to understand in the water supply planning picture, the city's been extremely conservative in its approach to planning, moving from a 5-year drought planning window to a 6-year drought planning window to try and avoid the need for this drought supply. So try and push it off as far as possible. But even in that 6-year planning window, what you don't see in year 7, should we go there, is that we no longer have groundwater. So not only are we looking to make up our lost and depleted surface waters at that point in time, the groundwater is not a resource to us either.
All right, and this way we push the decision back as far as we can. Correct, Mr. Hagmark?
Yep, that's the plan with our current approach and our long-term water supply plan is to try and push pushing this button as far out as we can.
Mr. Hart?
Well, just to be clear, this is really just the first step, and this is really just to get enough information to even make an informed decision at a later point in the fall. And so we are spending money to find the answers to all the questions that everybody has, all the questions the public has, all the questions the Coastal Commission has. Everybody involved has a lot of significant, serious policy, technical, environmental questions that we don't have any answers to, because this is 25 years old and we're trying to figure it out in this point in time. And so we're having to spend a fair amount of money to do that, to answer those questions, because this is enormously complicated, and the potential cost that everybody's very concerned about is a big number, and that ripples through rates, and that has consequences for lots of different things. But it's important for us to get this information as fast as we possibly can so we can make an informed decision. That's essentially what we're being asked to do today, is move forward, get information so that we're better prepared to answer all the questions that anybody's going to have about this. I guess that wasn't really a question, was it? Question mark at the end, maybe. I don't know.
Got to jump on his commentary. Okay. Can I ask about El Nino? And I hope that's not a silly question, because I've heard people say next year or next winter will be an El Nino winter. And it seems sometimes when people say that, it does rain a lot more. And Councilmember Hotchkiss did bring up, where are we with our water supply needs? You're not a climate specialist, Mr. Hagmark, but...
No, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. We are constantly watching NOAA. We're always looking to see what the predictions are, and we have heard the exact same thing you've heard, that they are predicting that for next year. The problem is in the past, it has been basically extremes. It could be that we receive extreme rainfall from that and basically in the drought, or it could be we get nothing, depending on kind of where that high settles. If it settles off the coast and pushes all that moisture up and around us, that doesn't do us any good. So unfortunately, we can't. I don't want to leave our city's water supplies up to NOAA at this point, and we're going to move forward with the due diligence here. And if it comes true, that would be great.
Okay. Let's go to public comment. Susan Jordan with the California Coastal Protection Network is first, and then Connor Everts, he's with the Southern California Watershed Alliance. Ms. Jordan, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. Susan Jordan, Director of the California Coastal Protection Network. And while I understand that your staff is starting to get back up to speed on desal, I've been working on it steadily for the last 15 years, and for the last 3, focused exclusively on the Huntington Beach Poseidon desal facility. That applicant has now been instructed to go back and do subsurface feasibility studies, and they're in the process of getting those experts in right now. My concern here is that this scope of work and the amount of money that you're considering does not include any evaluation of alternative intakes. And in fact, when this facility was done, nobody understood the impacts of open ocean intakes. And that's why 20 years later, well, actually in 2010, the State Water Board eliminated them, phased them out for power plants. These are not good technologies for your marine environment. And there seems to be a real misunderstanding about permitting. Now, if you're going to try and go in, and I believe you do need a new CDP. In fact, I think you might be technically in violation because I don't think you got a CDP for the removal of the facility. But be that as it may, it's really water under the bridge, no pun intended. But there's this idea that you have to have all these beach wells on the beach that go down into an aquifer. That's completely erroneous. We have all this information. There's a technology that wasn't available then that's subsurface infiltration galleries that sit beneath the ocean floor. In terms of testing, doing an entrainment and impingement study, that's going to take you a year, and then they have to crunch the data. So that's going to set you back. That's not going to move you forward. If you want to move forward, you get in there right away and you do subsurface studies. They take a few weeks to gather the data, and Poseidon can tell you this because they're having to do it right now, and then maybe a couple of months to analyze the results. So what I see this path that you're potentially going down is going to work counter to what you want to achieve, which is getting a quick answer. I also understand from having a conversation, and there was another misperception that this would set you back 18 months. Wrong. So I have a lot of information. I've been working on this a lot. I'm probably over my 2 minutes, but I don't see the clock. I think my letter explains a lot of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Everts?
Thank you very much. Connor Everts, Southern California Watershed Alliance and the Desal Response Group. So I guess I'm aging myself, but I was here when the plant was built in 1991. I was looking at it as a possible resource, and yet we ended up with a situation where it did go to El Nino, and the plant sat idle for 23 years. I also worked in Ventura, where we looked at that option and state water. We actually got neither one, and we improved our local efficiency. I then served on the Casitas Municipal Water District, where we looked at maximizing resources. So according to your website and your urban water management plan, you're about 130 gallons per day per person. Long Beach, which has its own power plant, is at 107. So even if you've dropped down part of that and you're required to drop anyway, you have a long ways to go in terms of levels of conservation. I just drove by Cachuma, so I see how it's been. I've seen it that also at the end in 91, and I saw it in 77, 78 too. So we do go through these serious cycles, but what we should really do is invest in cost-effective programs, including recycled water. And you could at least wait a month until these meetings happen with all these agencies, and you really get up to speed, because I too have worked on this issue for far more years than I thought I would. But the real interest is doing more conservation reclamation, and if we go to El Nino, to be ready with stormwater programs. So that's the information I want to make sure you hear, and this is a large commitment of funding, and it's only going to be the beginning. Since you built your plant, there are no large-scale working plants in California, and there's reasons for that, and there's many challenges that lay above, and if it does rain, it'll sit idle as a stranded asset again. Thank you very much.
Well, you have 30 more seconds. Can I ask you a question to use up that time? So what is wrong with an open water intake?
First, they're illegal. So for 30 years under the Clean Water Act, there's been a challenge of doing those, especially at power plants, because of the impact on the sea life, the little tiny life force of the ocean, the fish eggs, the fish larvae, and
they get vacuumed into the pipe.
The screens. Actually,
Okay.
into the screens, it's 100% mortality. There's a discussion on screens, but really the solution, like you were talking about, and they've done this at Dana Point with the Municipal Water District of Orange County, is to filter it through sand, then you don't have any impact on the sea life. So those are the things that have evolved over these 24 years we've been talking about desal plants in California.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
information. Thank you. It's to the council. Mr. Hart?
Well, let's talk about that specifically, because my understanding is that's exactly what we're doing today, is to spend money to answer those questions, to exactly pursue the direction that Ms. Jordan and the last speaker were talking about. What is it we need to do to get a permit? What is the current state of technology? What's available to us? What do we need to do to have the proper way to make this plant operate and to find out the course ahead? And there's an enormous amount of work both on the ocean side of this and the land side of this. And I think the direction the council has been giving pretty strongly is hurry. We've been saying that to staff. We have monthly updates on the water supply situation, so that there's, I think, a great sense of urgency from the council and directed to staff to please do these things as expeditiously as possible. So while I understand everybody wants this information, I think the fastest way to get that information is to go do that. Am I missing something in that perception of things?
No, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hart, you're exactly right. This team we put together is exactly to help us work through this very complex issue, and we have not landed or on anything at this point. We are wanting to get this forward. We know it's a long process, and we want to get this started. So I don't know. Not having this team on board, we'd be at a major disadvantage because we're not desal experts. This isn't something the city walks around doing. So bringing on this team that has gone through a lot of these major projects up and down California and internationally is really critical to us being able to sit down with these state agencies and work through the issues, because I keep hearing differencing of opinions on how long certain things take, but I think that's exactly what we're going to sit down in the next couple weeks and work through.
Well, I think Ms. Jordan's specific offer of assistance, her expertise, the fact that she's been involved in this, in a super detailed way, is very valuable. We're lucky that she lives in our community, and so we're going to take advantage of that too. We're going to leave no one stone. And I can understand how there might be some confusion. The staff report is trying to do the best it can with a very dynamic situation with information. We've talked about that before. We don't want you spending all your time on staff reports because there's lots of work to do. So there's a tension here. But I did talk for about 45 minutes yesterday with Ms. Jordan, trying my best to explain the situation. And I don't know that I made my point as clearly as I could. So. Well, and maybe we're getting closer here, and I appreciate that. And I think everybody has the same goal in mind. And I think the most important thing is for us to get the best information that we can, and to get all the agencies and all the other interested parties involved, and to look at this thing from the bottom up. And that's why I think this makes sense to go ahead today.
Very good. Mr. White, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, this contract is the result of 6 months of council and staff engaging to come up with this step. And as I understand it, there's nearly $1 million on the table here, but we're not going to spend it all by the 22nd of May. We're in option plays, and El Nino could come in September. And we could start getting rain in September. And I know, and my comments all the way along have been, let's make sure it's always an option play, so that we can stop at any given point when it's clear that we're safe. And so that's just at least been my viewpoint, and I believe that message and that part of the strategy is part of what we're dealing with, to say nothing of purchasing water and making use of all the other resources, and including stronger conservation programs. Maybe we're only at 130, but we've been at least steadily improving the conservation strategies year in, year out. So I appreciate that we have, and also that we have now the full engagement of the various parties. We have Ms. Jordan, and your name, sir, again? Connor Everts. And your face is familiar from previous times, and these are, again, the full dialogue is in place here, and we have now meetings a couple of weeks away. I think that's healthy, and it's not just sort of hiding under a rock. It's going to the places where we can get the best information and open the conversation, continue the conversation to stay on the path for possibly using desal as soon as possible. None of us want to do it, but I too was there 25 years ago, and it's really ugly when you just run out of water, plain old run out of water. And we don't want to be forced to conserve to get down to 40 gallons a day or 50 gallons a day. We don't want to go there. So this is one option for stretching out our supplies. And I think this is a respectable combination of strategies to deal with this issue, and I certainly support it as well.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Did anything that either of the public speakers say come as a surprise to you, staff?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, the illegal intakes, I wasn't aware that the below or above grades intakes were illegal. So
okay,
we'll have to follow up on that.
Anything else that sounds sort of significant?
The other point that I think is important too is the water usage that was reported, the CDP water usage of 130. Now that's an average for our community based on the 5 million tourists a year and all the restaurants and everything. If you actually look at our single family residents on average, they're using about 86 gallons per day. So a lot, per person, which is a big difference. And I think get into the statistics. There's all kinds of ways to look at it. We have to publish certain numbers, and that would be 130 is what our average is if you spread it over our population.
So you can incorporate what they said in our program, as it were, or in the way you're looking at things now, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we're very open-minded going into this, and I think it would be, like I said before, we'd be at a major disadvantage not to go to these meetings with some experts with us, because this isn't something we deal with every day.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to disclose that as Mayor Pro Tem, I got a phone call today from Charles Luster, the director of the Coastal Commission, and he expressed a desire to work together with the city of Santa Barbara. He wants us to recognize that there's questions about our coastal permit and that he's looking forward to working together to evaluate information and alternatives. So I just wanted to let you know that I talked to him today. I do have an issue with the lobbying firm. I'd like to vote against that. So if we're all done talking about it, I would entertain a motion for A and C, and then I can support those two things. Anybody else have anything else to say?
So move A and C.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I move B.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Against. Oppose. Okay, so do you have what you need? Okay. Well, that was it. We have council member committee assignment reports. Anybody do anything interesting this last week? What? No lights? I did want to, I'll go. I was the MC of the Chocolate Divine event. It's the Santa Barbara Rape Crisis Center fundraiser, and a worthy cause, and we also had a good time. And I know I did something related that wasn't all fun, but I'll just report on it next time. Let's see. Madam Clerk, would you read our closed session items, please?
Item 13, conference with labor negotiator. Item 14, conference with legal counsel pending litigation. Donald Sipple and New Singular Wireless, PSC LLC et al. Versus the City of Alameda, California et al. LASC case number BC 432270. Item 15, conference with legal counsel pending litigation. Janetta Ann Perdue Rizkallah and Tariq Ramsey Rizkallah versus City of Santa Barbara et al. SBC SC case number 31383789. And item 16, conference with city attorney, anticipated litigation.
Very good. Councilmember Hotchkiss does have a report.
Yeah, I neglected to report that last Thursday, Milpas Community Association donated I guess it's an electric golf cart to Casa Esperanza to help them with their outreach efforts and to give greater mobility to their security folks, so when there was a problem reported, they wouldn't be limited to getting there on foot. And they immediately put it into use and talked to 3 people that were kind of hanging out, trying to help them and say what you're doing. So, but it was a great example of the private sector working together. I mean, with our vagrant problem, and not coming to the city and saying, "Oh, by the way, we need $2,100 more dollars." They raised it themselves, did the whole thing, their own inspired idea, and the Casa Esperanza folks have a whole new attitude. They're even thinking of, I kidded them, I said maybe we call it the Nueva Casa now, so we'll see how it goes.
I like it. Mr. Hart?
Well, Councilmember Hotchkiss reminded me that there was another great public-private partnership event that happened on Saturday night with the La Cumbre Junior High School Foundation. They have the Gateway Project over on the west side where they're trying to remodel the theater. That's about an 1,100-seat theater over on the west side, and really dramatically kind of improve the accessibility of that building to the community, making it kind of effectively a community cultural center. And they were having a fundraising event. They raised a portion of the funds that they need to complete that project. There's additional funding needed from private donations, and folks should contact the La Cumbre Junior High School Foundation if they're inclined to help support that important cause.
Thank you. And we will not have a report from closed session, so we'll be adjourned.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I wanted to correct that. On item 14, there will be a report depending on the council's action. So we discussed conducting that item immediately after the labor relations, before labor relations, so that we can come back out and release the clerk as quickly as possible.
So that's a note to City TV to stand by because we might be coming back.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. For now, we're adjourned.
Pleasure's mine and I will pay the bill. May I take this occasion to say that the whole human race should fall down on its knees. Show that we're grateful for mornings like these, for the world's in a wonderful way, on a wonderful day like today.
We're reconvening the meeting of May 6, 2014. We have an announcement from our City Attorney, Ariel Kalan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. The City Council in closed session voted by a vote of 7-0, motion by Council Member Francisco, second by Council Member White, to authorize the city to petition the California Supreme Court for review in the case of Sipple versus City of Alameda. Sipple is the party adverse to the city, and that's it.
Thank you.
One small correction, the vote was 6-0-1 with the mayor absent.
Thank you.
Very good. Meeting adjourned.